Good morning and welcome to Sunday Coffee. Joining today, my, as usual, co host, the future governor of Virginia, TK Eppley. And today we have a special guest with Lynn Yap. Lynn is the author of The Altruistic Capitalist: How to Lead for Purpose and Profit. Lynn also runs an organization that helps to make women better leaders. I'm your host, Dr. Dan Ford, and this is EchelonOrchid.
Guess who's back?
Oh, good morning, Lynn. Hey, how are you this morning?
Good morning and happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday. I'm glad to see that as the actual order kept it up to where you're in the middle of the screen. A lot of times it switches them. I almost feel like it's random sometimes.
Thank you for having me on the show today.
Absolutely. So, Lynn, we spoke quite a bit in the pre-show and kind of get to know you. I find your background quite interesting. One of the things I thought that because there's a lot of people that when they get involved in Wall Street, they fall in love with the money, and it seems as if you only had that love affair for you was very short-lived. And I know you were working on a very high-profile case and some personal things. You could just tell us a little bit about how you got to the financial world and why you decided to leave. I feel relatively quickly.
Right. Actually, my first job was as a corporate attorney. I'm actually qualified in two jurisdictions. I'm qualified in New York, and I'm also qualified in my home country of Malaysia. I practiced for a couple of years in corporate law. And as I was doing that, I realized there was this other group of people called the investment bankers who was responsible for creating the transactions and coming up with the structures for the work that I was doing. And so I got a little bit more interested in what they were doing and basically hustled my way into the investment banking world without having studied accounting, corporate finance. I never touched PowerPoint as a lawyer. So I felt like I was lucky, but I also hustled my way into a job in an investment bank. This was still in Malaysia. And that propelled me to get a job in investment banking in Hong Kong, which then allowed me to get a job in New York, and that's kind of how I ended up here. I ended up in New York. Um, so my how I left investment banking. I was working on the I was working on tech IPOs. This was after the last financial crisis, 2008. After I graduated from Wharton with my MBA, I went back into investment banking and I was working on tech IPOs. Um, and one of the things that I was working on, this was May of 2012, I was working on Facebook's IPO when I found out that my grandmother in Malaysia was ill, and the doctors were not very hopeful, and my family thought I should go home. And so I go to the team lead, and I said, "Look, this is the situation, and I would like to go home to say goodbye to my grandmother." Um, the answer was no. Came quite quickly. I was like no, and there was no real discussion about okay, who could take over running the deal, because I was, I'd work with him on courting Facebook and trying to get on the front page of the S1 because it was like the deal that everybody wanted, and at that time was like um, the biggest tech IPO of the year, and and so I was torn between the duty to my family and also commitment to my work. And I'm quite proud of my work. I put a lot of time and investment to into this career that I believe in. I stayed in New York. I didn't go back to Malaysia to see my grandmother for the last time. She passed away. Facebook went public, and then that was kind of it. For a while, I felt angry. I felt guilty as well. I couldn't talk about this story for a while uh, because I thought, well, I mean, what what more can be asked of me? I sacrificed my every Sunday, the holidays, friends' birthdays, weddings. I miss a lot of these things, but this last event really shook me. And so I started thinking more about what was important to me, what were the values that motivated me and drive me. And that was when I decided to leave investment banking. I thought that has to be a better way for business. We say people are our greatest assets, but as I'm, studying all the financial statements, we don't really see the impact of what businesses do on our communities or on our employees. And I wanted to understand, how is it that we can use business? Because I believe that capitalism can be used as a force for good. How is it then that we can encourage our business leaders and use the tools that capitalism has, such as creativity and innovation, as a force for good? And so that's kind of why I left investment banking, and led me to my journey now to finding my own organization, that is Actv8 Network. Um, Long story short, kind of.
No, I think that's a sum up. I mean, I think your story probably resonates much more with people today due to COVID than what it did back then, because now people are at least choosing to have, and I hate using the word work-life balance because it always balances, but they're choosing to ensure that they are getting just as much fulfillment from their personal life as they did their professional life, and are choosing, that aspect of, hey, I want to work from home so I can have a better life outside of work, which I think is absolutely healthy, because if you're only doing things that increase your career, you are no longer well rounded, and that well roundedness helps you to become better at your career. At least that's what I happen to believe. I haven't tested this outside of, well, only do experiments on my own employees. They don't know it, but you know. But that, I think that's now today. I mean, a lot of people, and it's so interesting when you look at the polls on LinkedIn with this. Employers are like, "I want you in the office," and the employees are going, "If I have to come into the office, I'll go find another job."
Mhm.
So there's a huge gap between what's expected, and I know TK shares this. I don't care where you work as long as you get your job done. Like, the aspect of needing to be in the office should be rare, and it's really with high level, collaboration for those strategic decisions. But you're not doing that every day. It's that's a point in time, because then you got to go and execute. When it comes time to execute, I don't care where you work.
I think if you look at it, I was, whether it's my kids or people that I can have influence over, it's, look, poor to middle class people, they trade time for money, right? You got to be at a place for 8 hours, and we're going to give you so much money to do that. The wealthier people get, or the wealthier people strive, they trade money for results. And in this economy where everybody's scrambling for employees, if everybody took a job, we'd have functionally zero employment, right? There's always gonna be a certain percentage, but what economists consider to be full employment, if everybody just took a job, we'd have full employment, because they're out there. Everybody's, so there's this big fight for employees right now. And because of it, it's a seller's market, and they can determine, hey, I'll sell you my services, but here's the parameter I want to do it in. Dan and I both spent a lot of time in software companies, and so software companies have a unique ability to say, hey, my workforce can be largely remote. All right, well, now I build something, and so we largely have to be in the office. Mm-hmm. And the few folks that we have that do the software and stuff, in fact, one of them is Canadian, and he's having a hard time renewing his passport. There's just a big long queue of people to renew his passport. And he's to the point where he feels really isolated. He wants to come to the office, not every day, but he wants to be free to come to the office when he wants to kind of recharge his social batteries and his team battery. Mm-hmm. Right? Because so tomorrow, like, it's once a month, I usually buy everyone lunch, and so we were at a big trade show last week, and I want to let everybody know what happened at the trade show. And so those of us who are there, we're going to buy him lunch, and we're going to talk about that. Well, I'd love to have him in the room, but the next best thing is to put the computer there and let him be part of it via Zoom, right? And so
Right.
that's the A.5 answer. It's not the A answer.
Yeah, I mean, like, what are I'm excited to see like what are the new solutions, the hybrid solutions, because it's not just this coworker who's in Canada and he can't come in because for visa reasons. Well, what about the women, the mothers who have to stay home to take care of their kids, or who have an elderly parent that they're at home taking care of? How do we ensure that they're continue to be they don't feel the pressure of having to sacrifice either one of these commitments and duties, whether it's family or work, but they're still continually included? Because we want to keep. I mean, as women get older, then some of these family commitments become a little bit harder to balance, right? We have, our parents get older and more health issues, and the same similar with children. The women then need to balance that a little bit more. It's a little bit more difficult to manage the priorities. How do we include them? How do we continue to include them in the conversation so that they don't, to support them, and they take off some of the pressure of that having to fight the two?
So I think part of that comes to this. I think there's very few things that are true hard deadlines today. We know about some of the hard deadlines. If you're in the accounting field, it's month end, it's quarter end, it's year end, and we can plan for those things. It's very, so when there's very few hard deadlines like that, then why do we care which 8 hours or whatever it happens to be does the person work? And I would say, looking at my wife during COVID, when her kids were here, with because they her and her ex-husband share custody, that multitasking aspect of, one, she's an engineer, so you really don't want to get in her way, so to speak, when she's designing these bridges, because if something goes wrong, I mean, it's catastrophic, right? Because the bridge isn't going to work. But so that aspect of being, well, she knows, and she was able to finally convince the powers that be at her employer, in that, look, I am going to be working from 8 a.m. till 10 a.m. and then deal with some of the kid stuff, and then I'm going to be working from here to here, here to here, here to here, and inevitably, she always works more than what she says she's going to wind up doing, but she wants to set the expectation of, hey, look, if you're scheduling a meeting, I'm not, because the kids are here and they're doing remote learning. So I've got to make sure they're getting their education, because they don't have that external influence of being in the classroom and the teacher being there saying, hey, Alexander, whoever, you're not, you need to stop talking, or whatever. And I think that's a part of it. It shouldn't matter, work. I believe most people are good in nature, and if they commit to, hey, I'm going to work 40 hours, which really to me means they're working 22 hours. That's I think that's pretty much the max productivity you can expect in a 40-hour work week. The rest of it, you're kind of somewhat dialing it in, and that's just we could only go for so long. So if I'm getting more than 22 hours of productivity in that 40-hour work week, I'm ahead of the game.
Yeah. Well, is she? Sorry.
Then let me ask you this: when you first started kind of telling your story and talking about why you left investment banking, the word that anger didn't come to me, right? And I knew if you miss a family event, especially with a relative passing, there's going to be anger, right? And disappointment and a whole bunch of other things. But when you were talking, the word that came to me, and then again, when you were talking about having single parents at home, trying to manage all of this, the word that jumped out to me is empty. Right? In order for you to say, hey, I'm going to make a big life change and I'm going to leave investment banking, right? And all the financial gifts that can give you, I think you have to be empty. Right? There's a void that's there, and you're going to be drawn to the void like a vacuum. And I think, it's hard, with a single parent situation, what's the void, right? You're going to say, hey, I can miss a relative dying, right? Especially, not a child, but my grandmother, in the afterlife, they'll understand, right? But in the immediacy, we're trying to educate kids at home because of the pandemic and everything like that. I can't miss that. And so I think if you try to do that, there's an emptiness there, and you're going to still be drawn to that void, and you're going to be unproductive.
Yeah. A couple of things came up when you said emptiness. When I hear the word emptiness, I actually think opportunity. I practice meditation, and what that does is what some of that does is basically create to empty yourself and to come up with a blank page. And I like when I get to that blank page because there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of space for creativity. So I see that. In another sense, empty at the point when I left my role in investment banking, was that I guess what I got to the point where I felt that what I was doing was empty of meaning, and I was searching for that in my work. And I think that is what a lot of us are searching for in our work now, to have meaning, to know that what we're doing matters to someone else, or matters to the planet, matters to the community, matters to our family. Like what we do is important. So that's kind of the two ways in which that the two things that came up to me when you said the word empty, the potential for opportunity.
I'll digress just a slight bit for a moment there. What kind of meditation do you practice?
I practice Vipassana meditation. It's a 10-day silent retreat. I started this a few years ago. And so you go on this basically 10-day silent retreat. You meditate for 100 hours in this 10 days. There are no devices. Everything is taken away from you for 10 days. No books, no writing materials. You're just in yourself to reflect and to observe what is. And what I like very much at the end of the 10 days is, like I say, there's a lot of energy, and I feel a lot of love for the people around me, and to a certain extent altruistic and selfless, if you like. I just want to help someone else. There's a lot of energy and ideas that come up at the end of the 10 days. On day 10, when I get my books and writing materials back, I'm just writing for a few hours, because there's like all these things that I want to do to help someone else. And so that's kind of what I like from these 10-day retreats.
Right. Now, do you meditate now? I mean, after those retreats, do you meditate daily?
Yes, I try to.
I think that's good. So I practice qigong, and so
Mhm.
which focuses a lot more on breathing, and
Mhm.
but I consider that a form of meditation, even if it
Mhm.
doesn't meet its truest definition. But for me, it's about how much more oxygen can I get to the brain so I
Mhm.
can be more productive.
Mhm.
And I do that daily. And there's so many things that just come to mind when I'm in that particular meditative state. And that's
Mhm.
where I feel like a lot of my thinking occurs, even if it is somewhat subconscious, because I'm just trying to think about nothing, which is hard. And
Mhm.
then when you try to think about nothing, then all the good ideas start seeming to pop up.
Yeah, I think that's the same with sport. When I also run, I started running in March of last year when basically everything shut down. And that also helped me. I'm just focused on my breath, focus on how I feel when I'm running. I think that's also a certain type of meditation, right?
Oh, sure.
When you're just focused on being present on what's on the current moment. And I think that's important um, to increase focus. It helps with creativity, and to a certain extent, um, be a bit calmer, because this is all we have is right now, really. Just focus on that.
Absolutely. So before we get into your Activate network, which I really want to dive into, I want to talk about your book.
Okay.
The Altruistic Capitalist. And so I guess my first question about your book is, because I don't want to go through all of it, and I'll put the links in here for people to read. Tell me about the laws of the jungle.
The laws of the jungle.
Yeah, that's one of the chapter titles that you have in the book.
Right. So I think that a lot of times, I'm just going to go a little bit maybe into the title. We label capitalism as ugly, but I don't think there is a problem with capitalism per se. I think it's a tool that I think it's a tool. It's a tool just like technology. We can use it for good or bad. And I like capitalism. I believe that we can use it to innovate, to come up with great ideas in order to create new products, new services that can serve marginalized communities. So it's just a question of how it is that we use. The intention that and the responsibility that us as business leaders that we have is to create the right mindset and the right culture in order to use this tool that can help and serve the planet, serve our communities, serve our employees, and basically help each other to solve some of the global problems that we have.
I think that's true. I happened to be at a board meeting yesterday, a strategy session, and one of our board members brought up this aspect of, I think he said, and I'm probably going to misquote it a little bit, but like our pay gap from those that are the workers to those that have the capital, starting in like the early 1970s, has disproportionately gone out of what was supposed to be the normal distribution of those that are receiving compensation because they invested the capital versus those that are actually performing the work. And
Hmm.
I think what I kind of heard from that was those that have became more greedy and wanted to keep more of that share of the pie with themselves, which, hey, they should have. I believe that they should have more of the pie. But if you don't continue to invest back into your employees and making sure that they have a fulfilling life, then they're not going to perform well. And then therefore you need more people in order to keep moving that needle. And, TK and I have talked about Price's law, where the square root of any organization performs 50% of the work, and then the rest of it performs the other 50%. If I got to keep adding to that other part of that 50%, then I'm ultimately going to lose as a business leader. And that means you have to make sure um, your people have everything they need in order to have a fulfilling life. And not always does that mean money, but you don't have to. Like I would look at it, if I owned a very large business, health insurance would be free for the every employee. Like you would, I don't care what it is, in being self-insured from that aspect, because a lot of companies they don't people don't know that a lot of companies are self-insured, and so what that means is they're paying writing another check, every month back to the insurance company. Wouldn't care. I need you to be healthy. Gym memberships, whatever it is. Hey, uh, you know that's included in the benefits. I need you to be healthy because
Actually,
if
it's
you're
not
healthy,
even. Actually, I think it's bigger than this because there's a huge trend right now, especially in smaller tech companies, as they fight for employees, fight for like the top tier of whatever thinker they need. Is that they're not just it's not just free healthcare for the employee; it's free healthcare for everyone in their family,
yeah, yeah.
and it's a platinum plan, right? And it's usually it's usually about a $2,500 a month benefit that the employee receives, that they've got to go into the loaded cost, right? And so there's I don't think that trend's going away, right? You're still going to see, like laborers, the labor pool, minimum wage and slightly above minimum wage. I think over time they're going to end up on whatever the public health care, however that shakes out, right? It started as ACA, and wherever it's going to shake out, they're going to end up there, right? And everyone else, and this idea of employers providing healthcare is somewhat anomalous to the U.S., right? And it
Hmm.
started in 1954 when Congress said, "Hey, they need to put wage and price controls on certain things, especially with people that sell to the government, right? If you
Hmm.
work for a big government prime, your VPs can only make this much if you're doing prime contracts and everything like this." And so, in order to say, "Hey, we can attract and keep great employees," we're going to start offering them health insurance,
Hmm.
because until then, healthcare costs were relatively inexpensive, right? And that probably held up through the 70s and into the early 80s. Well, then
Mm.
all of a sudden they're like, wait a second, we can keep bringing the rag with employers. And so that healthcare cost kept increasing. And now there's a public outlet, whether you agree it's great insurance or not, there's a public outlet. Now you kind of flip the switch and say, hey, we can afford to pay for every one of our employers. And somewhat when VCs or PE firms are investing in companies, they understand that some of that capital is not just going to innovation, right? Even if they're making revenue to slow down their burn rate, right? I want to get to a point where I can use as much given capital on innovation as opposed to spending it on my burn rate, right? But they'll agree, and they'll agree quickly, that spending it on healthcare for everyone, right? Because it's not just me getting sick. The employees are going to become much less productive if one of my children get really ill and I'm trying to scramble around to figure out how to pay for it. And that holistic view of saying, hey, what's the unit of employment? Well, it's everybody in my family, whatever that looks like, right? And I think that goes back to what we started with, where you're like, hey, I've got to manage kids being at home from school, remote learning. We were talking about in the pre-show, and in lower income families, you have maybe one smartphone or one computer for 2 or 3 kids and a mom working and things like that. Well, it's the same thing. It's like, hey, how do you manage that limited asset to cover everybody and make everybody whole?
Yeah. Well, I mean, who's behind innovation? It's your employees. So you need to take care of them first, and reduce some of that pressure, whether that's stress of taking care of their family in terms of healthcare, or giving them what they need in order to feel included in the workplace. So if you're relieving that kind of pressure, you're also giving them the opportunity and space to be more creative and to be more innovative, and that automatically eventually translates into real business value. Take care of your people first. Give them a purpose, and give them that space in order to come up with good work, to be their best selves.
Well, I think today where it's really manifesting itself is, when I was younger and stuff like that, I'm probably the last generation of folks that went to college without a computer, right? We went with typewriters.
Well, TK, that's because you went in 1780.
It was 1840. Get it straight, right? Van Buren was president. Stop already. But this concept that even in the late 70s, early 80s, how do we gather information, right? You had to go to the library. You had to put trust in elders, right? The person standing in front of you in that classroom, to believe, to have the confidence that what they were saying was true. Right now, there's so many other sources of information, yet we seem to be less focused on, cat videos are still the number one thing that people watch on the internet, right? And so giving people these great resources for information and everything still doesn't overcome the basic fact that there's a minimum, you have to feel whole, and different people feel whole during doing different things. Like I have a friend of mine who's been an investment banker since we got out of college. Most people dislike him the minute they meet him. I only like him because I've known him since I was 8. He's my age. He's never been married. And the only thing that he thinks about from sun up to sundown is how he's going to make more money. And he will tell you that he feels whole. I can't comprehend at this stage of my life how he can feel whole, because he's my age. Right. But I'm saying he's lying to me. I'm just saying he has chosen to say, I'm going to truncate a big portion of my life because this is what's important to me. And that's how I define success in me. But I also think very few people define success the way he does.
Right. And that makes the world unique. All of us have our own dreams and own values that drive us.
Well, but he's a partner in an investment bank. And he's the guy that would tell you, no, you can't go see your grandmother, because it doesn't occur to him to ever take time off, right? And that, having that truncated of a value chain, those are the things that you have to say, hey, you have to imagine somebody else besides yourself, right? And whether you start in meditation, I call it, getting in a place of gratitude, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're grateful and you're not angry, you can do great things, right?
Yes.
Well, my buddy and folks like him, a lot of times they're not grateful, right? They see it, they're totally, hey, I'm end goal focused. Well, end goal is what? It's not sometimes solving the problem. It's putting more money in my pocket. And trust me, I'm the last guy to argue about people getting paid, right? But as a leader, if you're going to lead, you have to do it from the position of not everybody has my same value chain. And so what do they do? Well, when you're younger, like I said, it's that safety, it's having insurance, it's understanding if I need a day off to take care of usually my young child, right? I mean, some of the employees I have, they've got infants and toddlers. They don't want to miss those first important, the first one of the first shots and stuff like that. Not because they don't trust their spouse to not effectively do it, but they want to have that conversation for the rest of their life. And if you
Mhm.
understand that, it allows you to make better decisions as a leader.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to what you said about gratitude because I think that's so important as well. And I keep going back to creativity and innovation. I think when we're grateful for what we have right now and like really feel it when we tell someone else thank you for doing this, I think we get to see how much we really have. And when we get to see how much what is in our hands, we can see more opportunity. And when you can see those opportunities, you can start connecting the dots and start coming up with new ideas and innovation and be more creative to solve what it is that the world needs solving.
Plus, I think it's like I'm very cognizant every day of the week of telling the folks around me, especially when we talk, especially in the work confine, how grateful and how much I appreciate them.
Yeah.
Right, because I truly do. Right, I mean, they're like, it's like I tell you, I'm not an aerospace engineer. I'm not a composites guru. Right, and what we do requires those. Right, I'm not the innovation guy, but guess what? I'm holding the bag for all of this, and I'm grateful every day that every person that we have has chosen to show up and do what they do for us. Right,
Hmm.
and that's, I think, there's it's like there's an old Mad Men line where one of the employees comes walking in and says, "You never say thank you," and he's like, "I pay you every 2 weeks. That's the thank you." That's the mindset when I was younger. That doesn't pay. Yeah, everybody. You're right. You're working. You show up, and people give you money. Well, people show up at McDonald's and give you money, right? But it's the baggage claim. Do I work at baggage claim where every day is a bad day because nobody shows up and says, "Hey, thank you for getting my luggage there on time," or do I show up at a place where you walk in and say, "I appreciate everything you do for us because I know you have options."
Yeah,
Right.
it also lets the person feel seen and appreciated when you
Right.
look them in the eye and say, "Thank you. I know that you're maybe you don't have to say this part, but I actually I see you and I really appreciate what you did
Right.
XYZ day."
Absolutely. I mean, it comes back down to me like time value money. All right. And so, and while that's an equation as to how we're getting to the bottom line, I'm paying someone a certain amount of money for their time. But if I can make them feel even more valued for that time, they will, the quality that I'm going to wind up getting from that employee is going to be tremendously more. And therefore, you start to receive more of those profits. And then you reward the employees with much more than just money, that gratitude, that being interested in what's going on in their life and their home life. We, with where my full time job is, I mean, we provide them, the employee right now with LinkedIn Learning because we want everyone to have an opportunity to be better. And we're exploring and I think we'll wind up doing it, but we're exploring rolling that out to the entire household of the employee because if we want them to be better, why wouldn't we want the whole household to become better?
Right.
At a time and place of their choosing. But
It's Dan. I don't even think it's that. I think that's the value of it. Here's the other thing: if if one of the employees is doing a LinkedIn Learning thing and finds it interesting, and then says to his spouse or one of the older kids, "Hey, why don't you learn this too?" Now you're also creating conversational. You're bringing that tribe closer together because now they're sharing an experience, which whether that's at work or at home, and now that person that's at home can start to say when the other person has to work late, do things, go, okay, now I understand why, because I'm living some of that through this learning experience.
absolutely, So Lynn, going back to your book,
Yes.
uh, why do you think people distrust capitalism so much?
Um, that's a good question, and I would say maybe it goes back to sometimes we want to name a villain in our lives, and the big bad capitalist, the big bad corporation it's an easy one to name. It's like us versus them. Like I said, I don't think capitalism is bad per se. It's a tool. It's the leaders behind them and how we use the tool in which then we can make things for the better or for the worse. It's I don't think capitalism is bad. I don't think tech is bad. I think it's just how we use it. And it's easy for people to say, oh, those are the bad guys. We need to go after them.
Do you think you will see more CEOs like the CEO of Patagonia, who donated? I don't remember which year you said in the book, but I just recall that they donated all of their Black Friday sales to organizations that were going to better the world in some way. Do you think that will? Because I think that that the CEO thought they were only going to get 2 million in sales, and then instead they got like 10 million. I think is the number.
Right.
And do you think we'll see more companies doing some things like that will shift? Because in your like, which I happen to really love your writing, because you provide the actual like source where you got this. It's almost like a research book, which maybe that's from my academic side why I like it so much. But you list some polls that almost 50, I think it was like 54% of Americans believe that capitalism does more harm than good, and 51% of all millennials kind of believe that same way. So do you think that part of that trust will be, as you see more of this social programs that companies are going to align themselves with, you think that'll help to change the minds, or where do you want to go with that?
Where do I predict the business world will go? My hope is that we will see more companies using business as a force for good, to focus more on the impact that we can have, a positive impact, how we can create a sustainable and positive impact, excuse me, on the environment as well as our people in the next 2 to 3 years. Now, I say in the next 2 to 3 years for a few reasons. Firstly, investors, our communities, our employees, we're all these key stakeholders of businesses are starting to demand for more meaning at work from our employees, more sustainable businesses for our investors, assets under management for impact investing, and ESG, that's environmental sustainable governance funds. Those have skyrocketed in the last year, in the last 6 quarters. In terms of communities also want to see companies and businesses take a stand on issues, whether it's related to diversity, whether it's related to the planet, but these key stakeholder groups are starting to demand that. Second, we have social media, the internet. Companies can't really hide anymore. Things are becoming quite transparent. So you can't hide from greenwashing and say, oh, put a fancy marketing campaign up with nice photos and stuff and say, look, we're doing our job. Because employees will talk, people can see beneath these layers, and there is a platform, an easy platform for people to start talking. So I think companies will really have to start looking through the entire supply chain, how businesses are being operated, what are the different activities, and what is the impact on the different stakeholders, on the people around us, as well as the environment. And I think most importantly, why I come up with this timeline of 2 to 3 years is because the World Economic Forum in September of last year proposed 21 stakeholder capitalism metrics under 4 pillars, which are governance, people, planet, and communities. And some of these involve what is the gender pay gap, what are the diversity statistics, how much tax is the company paying into the areas in which they conduct business, how much investment in innovation that they're investing in, what type of research. Looking at businesses as a whole. And these metrics were done in conjunction, in consultation with regulatory bodies as well as international accounting standards, in order to find a consistent standard of reporting, so that us as employees, us as investors, us as consumers can go into these reports and understand what it is from one business to another. Sustainability reporting exists at the moment in various forms and concepts. It just differs from one company to another. But with this standard, then it's like looking at a financial statement. We know we can basically compare apples to apples across the different companies, and that becomes mandatory reporting. So you can't really hide behind, it's like, oh yeah, we know we don't do diversity reporting, or we don't report on our carbon emissions. It becomes part of that standard reporting package. It of course comes with issues, as with every new innovation, every new change with business. But I think this is a step in the right direction, and it also nudges businesses to think more holistically and not just at dollars and cents.
I think it's going to take some brave CEOs to actually make that happen. And I say that because, a lot of, C-level employees in publicly traded companies are directly compensated based on, stock price. And if the stock plummets because they're doing the right thing by the world, what I learned in B school, and I'm sure you probably had the same thing, is that, the reason why you're in business is to increase stockholder value. And so that's contrary in some ways is to these other things, because it's going to cost more money if you're doing more things for for the world. It's going to drive down your your capital ratio, and that, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, but I think you're going to wind up seeing like a lot of boards go, unfortunately, I don't care. Your stock price dropped 20%, therefore you're fired.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I look at it like this.
I hope I'm wrong. But
no, let's look at it like this. So when we talk about, in particular, let's talk about greening up the planet, right? Because I think sometimes we get myopic about it by country, right? But that's a global issue, right? I mean, with jet stream and everything, what happens in China affects us. What happens in Africa affects us. What we do affects Eastern Europe and everything like that. And so you get to this point, and so today, and I think the bad side of social media is everything can be so rabid, right? So I can, as a business leader, affect change positively on the planet. My job is to go, as I'm decreasing carbon emissions, how far can I tilt that before I start to drastically affect the value of the company that I've been asked to run? And the problem, I think, with social media is you can't have that discussion anymore. We either have to do it all or we have to do none. In the example of the US, we've agreed never to build another coal-fired power plant. India, China, not only have they not agreed to that, they're in the process of building them like they're going out of style, right? And India's argument is, hey, at the turn of the 20th century, US, you got to do everything you wanted, unknowingly destroying the planet. Why don't we get our turn? Right now, and that's the thing. But in the US, a lot of times we're like, hey, we've got to get green really fast. Well, okay, at what expense? Right? If some groups put it at $32 trillion to do what some of the politicians and environmental groups are advocating. Well, okay, we can destroy the financial fabric of the country, but it doesn't matter what we do if the rest of the world isn't engaged in it. So as a business leader, you have to say, look, America in the last 5 or 10 years has done more to rid carbon from the world than any other country on earth. And we should be proud of that. We shouldn't be chastised because we're not doing more. But as a business leader, how do I manage that, manage expectation of the public, my shareholders, and everybody else, and keep the business together? Because that's ultimately what you get compensated for, is to manage all those competing interests and to provide shareholder value. And that's a hard thing. Like if you hear Bezos talk about it, which I think is funny, he's like, I own 16% of Amazon, but I've provided over $800 billion of shareholder value.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because that's the metric that he's been held in. And if you look at it that way, and that is an absolute to you, then he's done a great job.
Mm-hmm.
But tomorrow, all of these people that are advocating to get all the carbon off the planet, they're right now on Amazon ordering something. Because
yes.
that's how, and the pandemic has only made that stronger.
Uh-huh.
So what is Amazon's responsibility? To get vehicles that put less carbon emissions in Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And if they do that, the economic impact will be great because people still keep buying. They're going to buy. Now they just won't get crap for it along the way.
No, I don't think money is a bad thing at
Well, I'm
all. I think,
not saying you
yeah,
do
you need,
personally, but
yeah,
you understand the political groups out there like, hey,
you
at any
cannot,
cost, we have to do this.
you cannot solve you cannot solve some of the problems, some of the planet's problems, some of the social problems without cash, without money, without resources. And I think what I'm advocating for is thinking about things more holistically from all stakeholder value. Because if you look at short-term profits, which is what a lot of how stock market pundits do, and that's why there's a big shift after a big announcement. Um, if you focus too much on the short-term value, then you miss out on what's going to happen. What will it cost my business in 10 years, in 15 years? How much will it cost me to actually get my the resources I need for my business in 10 years? It might be fine today. I don't have to
Right.
invest in renewable energy or circular economy type products. I don't have to invest in that because I'm not going to be around in the next 10 years anyway to run this business. I'm going to make my money in the stock market today. And it's the next guy's problem in the next 10 years. Then yeah, that's looking at things only definitely from the stock market, the share price perspective, and the short-term financial value. But if we're looking at what does it mean for the next generation and what legacy that you want to look behind, think about think about the other considerations. Think about what it means for your employees. Think about what it is, your impact on the planet, because that what you do today will matter.
Oh,
And
exactly.
focus on what you can do it, because I think all of us can do. I think all of us can make a difference.
Absolutely. And it resonates with one of my favorite quotes from the movie Gladiator. What you do in life echoes in eternity.
I like that one.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I want to be able to talk a little bit about your Activate network, and I'll like the segue from, and I think this is maybe why you chose the network, and I may be wrong, so you can correct me. But you posit in your book that one of the um, groups that are going to lose out the most due to AI and automation are women, because women hold a lot of clerical jobs. And I maybe that's not the reason why. Maybe it's part of the reason. But I used to think like, oh, it's only going to be the entry level positions. And then after reading some of your research, whoa, I never thought about that, because AI, machine learning, those things are meant to uh, not necessarily eliminate jobs, even though that will be a result, and we have to figure out how we're going to redistribute those current employees to different areas. But they are automated tasks, data entry, things like that. So um, is that the reason why? Was there more to it? How did the Activate network come about?
Good question. Not necessarily related to what you mentioned right now. I think my vision for Activate Network is to empower our women leaders, to empower the women in our lives to do things that to achieve their dreams. And essentially, how it came about was, I as I mentioned before earlier in our conversation, I work a lot with tech startups. When I was in investment banking, I would go to a lot of conferences and meetings, and find that I'm one of the few women in the room, and wondering where the rest of the women are. My hypothesis is that, all right, if we look at it as a funnel, there are few women working in this sector because fewer women go into this area at college, and maybe let's look up even further up at the funnel. Maybe women are not going into into these careers at college because we've been told that women and girls are told, whether subconsciously or consciously, that there are certain things that they should do. There are some, they should be moms, they should be wives, they need to, go into certain types of careers, look a certain way, and all these shoulds and shouldn'ts kind of impact then the type of careers that they go into. So I started Activate Network more to show the more to help the women and the girls in the program to see, like, look, you have an option to break through those mental barriers that we have in order to achieve whatever it is that they want. They don't have to be They don't have to be anything else that society tells them to be. And that's more or less the vision and why I started Activate Network, to help women and girls break through any mental barriers that are there to achieve their dreams.
What have you found is the biggest? I hate to use the word challenge because I don't think that women are any less capable, but it does seem to me that women are much more just, I'll say, agreeable, and therefore they're not as ready to have that conflict. But I mean, is that the challenge? Are you trying to help them not avoid conflict? I mean, not that I think that women necessarily shy away; they handle it differently than what men do. But what is the challenges that you're seeing with getting women growing in leadership roles?
Very good question. And what I found in the programs is one of the things that kind of empower women. And I work with 13 to 16-year-old students, female students, and it's the same with uh, middle managers as well. Is to be seen, to be appreciated as a human being, and being seen and appreciated for who you really are gives you that self-confidence to go out and try things, put yourself in outside your comfort zone, to grow and to learn, and that empowers us as human beings to be better versions of ourselves. So that's what I try and do during the Activate programs. um, Another point is, I also built this community, this safe and secure community for women and young girls. Um, it's to a certain extent a space to help and support each other, to encourage each other to go and achieve what is it that they want and that they need. Because a lot of times, what it is that we don't believe in ourselves, we have doubts, and this safe community also helps them go towards their goals.
So I how long has the Activate Network been around? Like, and like, what success stories do you have from it so far?
um Thank you for asking that. I wish that, so when I started it, and I started it quite soon, after I left investment banking. I was trying out different things, wanted to see how I can help the community. Started out volunteering at different women's organizations as a mentor myself to understand. But really, Activate Network started, let's say, 2.5 years ago. I developed the program and I launched it and I went to market with it. And some of the stories I mean, I've done a few cohorts now, and in a short 3-month program, you see the girls grow from being fairly shy and fairly timid to being confident to come up and present and becoming more engaged. This is the feedback that I get from the schools as well. The student becomes more engaged in school, achieves better exam results. So that is the benefit from the school perspective. And from the women and company/business perspective, is that they also see more networks developing, more relationships developing between the women who participate in the program from the company. Um, and of course, they also then see more meaning in what they're doing, because through their work, they are learning, they're helping a younger person understand what career opportunities they are, but they're also solving, through the program, the women and girls are also solving a business problem that we set out for them. And so they develop brainstorming, they develop empathy, they develop listening skills, presentation skills. The women coach the students, so that helps them again understand and reflect on their own personal learnings and journey as a leader.
Very interesting. Now, have you developed kind of your own framework as to helping the women in business, to try to develop those skills, or do you follow a particular framework that already exists, whether it be servant leadership, positive leadership, a lot of those things, or what's the process of helping these women help these young women to.
So a lot of the skills that I develop, that I help the women develop during the program is related to coaching. So listening, there are training programs at the start of it to help them become better listeners and to become better managers that they can use then in the workplace. Each woman gets 2 students. One is typically more introverted, and the other one is more extroverted. And so as managers, as coachees, then just as in the workforce, you have to learn to flex your communication skills, to learn to listen and to see the perspective of another person. Because we all have a certain preference, and then we all have a certain bias, and we may be drawn more to one type of person than another. And then having this dynamic, then they get to practice their different management styles and different coaching styles in order to develop their skills as a leader a bit better. So that's one example of a tool I use. It's a very experiential type learning in the 3 months for the women. I also follow like a design thinking type process where I take them through problem statement definition, ideation, testing and feedback, and then refining the final solution. And so that through that they also develop different skill sets that's related to empathy, listening, communication.
That is very interesting. So how can we all help, Actv8 Network? What things can my audience do to kind of help you grow that and to, start making much more of a difference?
I would love to speak to business leaders who are interested to have this kind of programs, these type of diversity programs to empower the women in their workplace, to practice their leadership skills, to develop themselves as better managers. So I welcome, conversations, just people who are interested in diversity and inclusion type topics, to reach out. My email is lynn@altruisticcapitalist.com. That's LYNN at altruisticcapitalist.com.
Awesome. So another thing that we always do with our first time guests, Lynn, and you probably didn't know this, is that we like to provide a service back, which is to help. We believe that when you put the words out into the universe, they have to become true. So we like to hold people accountable to a goal. And so, when we next check up on you, what is your next goal, and when should you look to have accomplished that?
Oh, I was going to say, like, what timeline are we talking about here?
You define the timeline. We hold you
accountable.
All right. So let's say in 12 months, I would like to have signed up 5 new companies into the network, so that we have more companies connected to these young students when they're starting to look for jobs in the workplace. So yeah, let's talk. Let's see. And what is it? September of 2022, I would have 5 new companies signed up.
I think your goal is too low. We need to shoot for 10.
Okay.
Well, Lynn, TK, do you have a final question for Lynn or anything? No,
this was fantastic. I totally enjoyed it. Thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely.
Thank
Lynn,
you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I really appreciate it. And if there's, of course, anything that we can do for you in return as well, please don't hesitate to reach out. I know I have a bunch of things I'd like to talk to you about, especially with what, my wife and I are doing with our businesses here, and how we can, here in Indiana, start to, how can we, empower more women leaders here with where we're at. So we'll definitely be reaching out.
Thank you so much.
All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Hope everyone has a great Sunday and a great start to your week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.